Joining me now is Mike Hixenbaugh, NBC News senior investigative reporter, live in Houston. Charles Blow, columnist for the New York Times, and Michael Steele, former RNC chairman. Thank you all for being here. Welcome, Mr. Hixenbaugh, to the show. I want to ask you about the NRA and the vibe inside of that convention and how they managed to celebrate guns at a time when not far away, parents are preparing to bury little 10-year-old children.
Joy, I don't know how. That setup was really hard. I'm sorry. I came from Uvalde last night to be back in town to cover the convention. And what I found was a complete and utter disconnect. Across the street were protesters holding signs and children pleading for change, for something to change. And inside there were parents with their children showing them how to hold AR-15s and telling me why the policies that allowed this shooter to go and buy a couple of these guns days after his 18th birthday are so important, that those policies are what keeps us safe. And it's really hard to put into words how far away I felt from the scenes back in Uvalde. I was talking to some of those families and to teachers who talked about hiding on the floor for 35, 40 minutes.
Did anyone inside of that convention who spoke to you, did they even express any emotion about? I mean, I've been crying for 3 days, by the way, so don't feel bad about feeling emotional. Did they express it? Was there any emotion in there for these dead children and the teachers?
Look, I didn't talk to everybody. The thing that I witnessed that was the most jarring is on one side of the street, there were protesters, very emotional, screaming, shame, 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 murderers. And on the other side of the street, people wearing AR-15s on their chest, like on their T-shirts, holding up their cell phones and recording videos and laughing and mocking the protesters. I don't know how to bridge that.
Yeah. I don't even know how to understand it. Charles, the NRA, started out as, Union generals who were, dismayed at the poor marksmanship of the, people who were being recruited to fight to save the Union. And it just morphed into this other thing. I mean, they were all for gun reform when the Black Panthers were carrying long guns in Los Angeles. And then they decided to join the Southern strategy, and they've hardened into this other thing that we just heard described. There's no negotiating with that, right?
There is not. And in fact, I think that part of what you are seeing with the NRA convention is them trying to make a point. The part of the propaganda of the NRA and the Republicans who support them is that this has actually nothing to do with us, right? That these are criminals who are getting their hands on guns using the freedoms that we are gathering for law-abiding citizens against us, right? They believe that they want to convince America that these people are separate, that we have to, in fact, have more guns to protect ourselves from these few criminals who get their hands on the guns and use them in these ways. That is, if you believe that your true safety is only garnered if you have arms in your home, if you have a long gun strapped to your chest, if you have them in your truck, if you have them at the grocery store, then this doesn't penetrate for you. You can even feel sad. You can even say, this is a really bad thing that happened. However, that has nothing to do with me. My guns are locked up. I'm a law-abiding citizen. I've never done anything wrong with guns in my life. And in fact, because we have more guns in America than people, 99.9% of people have never used their gun against another human being in this country. So to a large degree, it's right. But it only takes a fraction to wreak absolute havoc. And that is what we have. And until we retreat from this idea of gun proliferation and also reducing the barriers to gun ownership and the rules around when and where you can have them, we will never get over the havoc that the fraction of a percentage are wreaking on our society.
Yeah, and Michael, let me play Beto O'Rourke, because I thought he was very magnanimous today. He was at that protest across the street, and this is what he said.
There are some including those who've lost those who are most dear to them, who will say it is too soon for us to talk about what we are going to do to prevent this from ever happening again. But I hope that you agree with me that the time for us to have stopped Uvalde was right after Sandy Hook. The time for us to have stopped Uvalde was right after Parkland. The time for us to have stopped Uvalde was right after Santa Fe High School. The time for us to stop the next mass shooting in this country is right now, right here, today.
Michael, why does that argument not compel Republicans? Because it does compel gun owners, right? I mean, you and I are friends. We know a lot of the same people. I don't know anybody. I literally don't. I don't care how many guns you have. I know people with a house full of guns. But they, rifles and things, they hunt, even if they collect guns. I don't know anyone who isn't moved by that except elected Republicans.
Well, the thing that I think is striking for me right now in this space is the fact that the narrative around the gun discussion has largely centered on an incorrect argument, which has allowed the hard right to harden their position such that any reform, any effort, Joy, to address what Charles was just talking about, for example, is considered a stripping away, a slippery slope towards, diminishing their rights under the Second Amendment. So this idea of control, gun control, has always been, in my view, the wrong argument to make.
It's bad marketing, for sure.
It's just bad marketing, and it's always been about reforms that would allow law-abiding gun owners to continue to enjoy their use of their firearms for hunting and shooting and other things, and for the country to focus like a laser on those, like this young individual, who are outside of that. And so the reforms, whether it was around, remember the gun show discussion around, finding who owns and who has access to getting permits. The bogus argument the governor of Texas is currently making about, well, we've always allowed 18-year-olds. Okay, that doesn't mean that, in the 21st century, that law should still be the hook on which you want to hang your Stetson. And so I think a lot of the argument now has to shift when what you hear after Sandy Hook and certainly after Stoneman Douglas, the David Hoggs of the world are changing that conversation. They're saying, look, I know we're going to disagree on a lot of this, but can we at least get to a space where we can begin to talk about the kind of common sense reforms, not control of your guns, right? We don't want to take anything away from you. We just want to put in place the reforms to save lives.
All we want to do is make an AR-15 as hard to buy as Sudafed or to rent a car, neither of which an 18-year-old can do. And by the way, just let me put this up real quick. I know we're out of time. Just the mass shootings, the worst mass shootings, this isn't even all the mass shootings since 1991, this shooting doesn't even rank at the top. This was the murder of a bunch of little kids. It's not even the top most deadly one. And Buffalo doesn't even come anywhere close, okay, shooting since 1991. The only difference between us and the rest of the world is that you used to be able to buy an AR-15 at Walmart, by the way, because it's a rifle. It's easier to get a rifle. You could buy it at Walmart till they stopped selling them in 2015. Walmart did more gun reform than the United States Congress. Mike Hixenbaugh, Charles Blow, Michael Steele. At Walmart, you could buy it. Still ahead. And also, if you can't stop abortion, they're saying you can stop abortion by legislating abortion, but they're like, you can't. So anyway, let's move on. Christian conservatives are offering thoughts and prayers. I'm going to ask about this in the next block. They're offering thoughts and prayers for the victims of America's latest school shooting, but guns are also a religion for many on the Christian right. Is that why we're not hearing more faith leaders calling for gun reforms? We'll be right back.